My name is Emily, and I'm a 32-year-old who works from the comfort of my home. It has been 5 years since I married John, and for a while, we enjoyed a happy life together. However, around the fourth year of our marriage, things began to take a different turn. The shift came when my once healthy father-in-law fell suddenly ill, prompting us to take on the role of caregivers. Consequently, we had to move in with my in-laws to provide the necessary support. Initially, we believed this living arrangement would be temporary. But due to John being an only child with no siblings to assist, we found ourselves unavoidably responsible for my father-in-law's care. Even the thought of quitting my job to focus on caregiving crossed my mind. However, perhaps due to the recognition of my hard work, I was fortunate to continue working from home. Our life in my in-laws' house began in a whirlwind of activity, but before long, challenges emerged. The most significant challenge was the harassment I experienced from my mother-in-law, a common issue that often plagues daughter-in-law and mother-in-law relationships. I found myself in the midst of these conflicts. My mother-in-law would often chide me, saying, "Emily, how long are you going to avoid your responsibilities? Get to tidying and preparing meals." Despite my assurances that I was not neglecting my duties, she accused me of spending too much time on my computer and referred to it as goofing off. This perception that being on a computer equates to idling is quite outdated. I had secured permission to work from home, and I didn't want to let go of the skills I had worked hard to acquire. Juggling household chores, caregiving, and work, I was determined to maintain my previous income. After about 3 months of diligent effort, I successfully managed to restore my income, which was quite fulfilling. My intense dedication was fueled by the financial challenges we faced due to John's income alone not being sufficient to cover our needs. While I hoped that our situation would improve with time, it seemed that our financial struggles were worsening. Upon investigating our expenses, I discovered that John was spending extravagantly, treating his colleagues to lavish gatherings and charging it to our credit card. Additionally, my mother-in-law was indulging herself with various hobbies and social activities, leading to more spending. As both John and my mother-in-law continued to throw their responsibilities of housework and caregiving onto me while freely indulging their desires, I reached a breaking point. My income was single-handedly covering our living expenses, leaving no room for savings. Overwhelmed by this situation, I decided to address the issue with my husband and mother-in-law. When I confronted them about their spending habits, both John and my mother-in-law vehemently defended their actions. John insisted that showing generosity to his colleagues was crucial for his image at work. He argued that he had to maintain a certain reputation among his peers. My mother-in-law also pushed back, asserting that her hobbies and social engagements were her way of enjoying her time. This confrontation only highlighted the growing tension between us. John and my mother-in-law dismissed my concerns, claiming that my lack of understanding about their respective situations invalidated my opinions. Despite my best efforts to communicate our financial struggles, their refusal to see the situation from my perspective left me feeling frustrated and unheard. In the midst of these challenges, it became clear that our family dynamic was strained on multiple fronts. The financial burden, the unequal distribution of responsibilities, and the lack of empathy for each other's viewpoints. As I continue to navigate these complexities, I remain hopeful that through open communication and mutual understanding, we can find a way to create a more harmonious and balanced family life. I work diligently, and you're well aware of it. I contribute to the household both financially and by taking care of your father. It's not just about housework. Don't spread falsehoods. My mother-in-law is taking care of my father-in-law, you say? Since you're not even going to the office, your earnings must be meager. Who do you think you are? Getting so arrogant just because you work part-time? This statement left me stunned and speechless. It seemed that this mother-son duo couldn't comprehend that I was genuinely working, looking after the house and my father-in-law, all while earning money. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law had apparently fed John a version of the story where she was the one caring for my father-in-law, casting me in the role of a lazy housewife. The thought of leaving crossed my mind multiple times, but my father-in-law was the reason I hesitated. He had always been kind to me since I married John, expressing his apologies for the challenges I had to face. He often said, "Emily, I'm really sorry that a wonderful daughter-in-law like you has to go through so much." I cherished him, and caring for him never felt burdensome. Leaving the house meant leaving him without the care he needed. So I made the decision to continue caring for him diligently until his passing. About a year later, my father-in-law passed away. During his funeral, I couldn't help but cry, mourning the loss of someone I held dear. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law showed no signs of grief and coldly questioned my tears. Her response shocked me, considering the lack of emotion she displayed. I explained that my father-in-law had passed away, and naturally, I was sad. I had been looking after him all this time. In response, my mother-in-law exploded with anger, accusing me of implying that she hadn't cared for her husband at all. In truth, my mother-in-law rarely participated in caring for my father-in-law. She took advantage of my efforts in both housework and caregiving while pursuing her own hobbies. Despite her claims of busyness, she found time for outings and excursions. She portrayed herself as the victim, painting a false picture of being mistreated by me, her daughter-in-law. This act extended to her pretending to cry in front of relatives. Externally, it seemed I was the one in the wrong, to the point where people advised me to be kinder to my mother-in-law. Some even sided with her and blamed me. Frustrated, I distanced myself from our relatives. John, noticing this, confronted me, accusing me of embarrassing his mother in front of the family. Being confused, I denied the accusations, explaining that I was merely expressing my grief over his father's death. However, John took his mother's side, implying that I could have taken better care of his father and not involve him. Feeling blamed and misunderstood by both John and my mother-in-law, I was left exasperated by the situation. The dynamics within the family became increasingly strained, with their inability to see my perspective adding to the frustration. Despite the challenges, my primary concern had always been my father-in-law's well-being. During our heated exchange, I argued, I had work. It was your duty as a housewife to take care of him. But my point was refuted. That makes no sense. I have work too, so that's unfair. Panicked relatives intervened, ending the argument. Yet my husband and I remained silent for the day. After settling the funeral affairs, a lawyer discussed the inheritance. The family home and land would go to John as per his father's will. The remaining money would be evenly split between John's wife and me, Emily. My mother-in-law protested, questioning why I should receive part of the inheritance. The lawyer explained that John expressed gratitude for my dedicated caregiving and wished to honor it. This decision, unchangeable, was made by John. My mother-in-law insinuated I was after the inheritance, claiming my caregiving was a pretense. I defended my actions, explaining I cared for my father-in-law out of gratitude and respect. In the presence of the lawyer, my mother-in-law's words were restrained, but frustration was evident. The lawyer continued, revealing that my father-in-law left a note stating I no longer needed to care for him. My mother-in-law's demeanor shifted from irritation to excitement. It dawned on her that I was no longer required to stay due to caregiving. She twisted my father-in-law's will, misinterpreting his intention for dividing the inheritance as a token of gratitude. In truth, my father-in-law and I had discussed this before his passing. He wanted me to be free from the house after his death and planned to use the will to deceive my husband and mother-in-law. He intended for me to leave without trouble. My mother-in-law, misled by the will, unknowingly played into his plan, attempting to push me out. While concealing my true emotions, I acted shocked by the will. I upheld the facade, making them believe I was genuinely surprised. Even my husband seemed unaware of my real significance in his life. My mother-in-law seized the moment to provoke my husband, suggesting he divorce me. However, I held back my true feelings and didn't reveal the underlying truth about my father-in-law's intentions. With tearful eyes, I looked at John after a lengthy pause. Finally, he conceded, indeed, divorce seems better. He acknowledged the family property was mine, his mother received the money, and I wouldn't have to worry about caregiving. I replied, I understand. There's no place for me here anymore. Equally saddened, I handed John a piece of paper. These were the divorce papers that had once caused a fight. He signed them immediately, and at last I was free from a life as a housewife. Finally, I don't have to see your face. A freeloader who doesn't work, get out. Appreciate that I put up with a parasite like you all this time, John hurled. After swiftly packing my belongings, I departed from the house. My mother-in-law watched with an inexplicable joy. Upon leaving, I promptly submitted the divorce papers at City Hall. Arriving at my rented apartment, I yelled out in the spacious room, ecstatic to be free from the painful marriage. My father-in-law's planned escape from the house gave me newfound freedom. As I adapted to remote work, my income increased, allowing me to live luxuriously without interference. One day, John called, asking for help due to financial difficulties. Amused, I revealed that my earnings were no longer contributing to their lifestyle, leaving them unable to afford it. In disbelief, John questioned my past earnings. I disclosed that my salary was substantial, and now, without hindrances, I was earning even more. He suggested living together again, claiming to still love me. I dismissed his words, refusing to return to that life. I hung up the phone and cut off all contact. Months later, I passed by their demolished house, hinting at financial troubles. I focused on my new hobby, attending wine classes, where I met a man who pursued me. After a year and a half of dating, we married. He respected my work, and we shared a happy life. Reflecting on my journey, I thought that perhaps this reward was a gift from my father-in-law.